All right, y'all. I am really excited for this conversation today. Kevin is one of those people that you can just count on for anything. He's kind of like a big brother in the sober space. And I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I send so many people your way when they come to me and they're like, I have a brother, or I have a partner, or I have a son. And I think that the way you present for men in the sober space is just really amazing. So I don't know if I've ever told you that, but I send people your way all the time. But I think that the way that you talk about this sober content with just like a lot of empathy and realism, which I think is lacking in this space for men, or I don't know if that's quite what I mean, but just that it's not as openly talked about in this space for men is really, really inspirational for me. So give our listeners a kind of a rundown of who you are, where you live, what you do, who your pets are, whatever the high notes you've got for us are, so they can know a little bit more about your story.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for sharing myself with other people that you think might benefit from it. So I'm Kevin. I am the Sober Ginger on Instagram, which is where kind of this whole thing started for me. Well, it didn't start there, but that's where me sharing openly started. I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm 42, married with one daughter who will be 15 this year, getting closer to driving, and she's going to high school next year. So that's kind of scary.
Terrifying.
Yeah, it's come up quick, it seems, but
if my son's Lego superhero video game is any indication, I'm horrified of him driving. It's already terrifying at age 6.
Yeah, I've already talked to her. I'm like, ooh, we should go to a parking lot sometime and just drive around right now. She's like, what? Really? You're gonna? I'm like, who cares?
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna do it then, or you're gonna do it now? Might as well start trying. I have 2 Chihuahuas that are now passed out on the couch right here. But yeah, I am. I can stop saying that I'm a tax accountant by trade now. I started out in accounting 21 years ago, and last month, I quit that job, and I am now coaching over at the Reframe app. So full time over there. And that's been, 3 years in the making. I'll be coming up on 3 years alcohol free at the end of April.
Amazing. Yes. And I know your sober date because it is my re-sober date, and also was the day of a Game of Thrones episode. So remind us what your date is.
My day one was April 29th, 2019, and April 28th, 2019. Mm-hmm. That Sunday night was probably the best Game of Thrones episode ever, mm-hmm. the Night King. And I didn't sleep through, or I didn't see the end of that episode because I knew I was starting the next day, and I was like, oh, I just got back from vacation. I'm like, I got to finish up all my alcohol because I'm starting this again the next day, which is
I had to rewatch. I had to rewatch that episode, so I know exactly what you mean. And it was, again, the day that I was like, this just isn't working. Yeah. So I like that you say that you were in accounting for 21 years, because that's like a whole legal drinking age lifetime ago.
Didn't even think about that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I did some drinking in those days, for sure. I mean, that's, I didn't start really drinking until college. And then once I started drinking there, it was binge drinking. And then that kind of went into work, where a lot of deadlines, high stress, things like that. And then we, at the end of the deadlines, we had end of busy season parties, and we always had happy hours, or when we were working a ton, we would still find time to go out on Friday and Saturday nights and drag our asses in the mornings on those weekends and things like that. But then like when I was about 27, I switched out of Big Four accounting into corporate accounting, which was a little bit more consistent, little less stress, or so I thought. eventually it was, and then it definitely wasn't after a while, as we started doing new projects and that. But started a new job, daughter was born. And so, I still drank socially and all that, but it was definitely, I think, less than, we had a new house. And so all those things kind of like life happened, and all those things kind of, made it die down a little bit, but it was still the social binge drinking was how I always drank. Into my 30s, then it was more like I'd get home from work, have a beer, and it kind of slowly crept in there. And then towards the end of my 30s, like I think 2015 was really a year for me. Like it was a good year for me career-wise. I worked all the time, and I was like heading up one of these big projects on the tax side of things, and like the whole the whole company was transforming from a legal perspective, and I was at the forefront of that with my boss and our team. But I drank a lot that year. I'd come home from work, I'd have a drink to kind of relax myself, I'd work, and then I would, drink at night because that was my time for myself, right? I mean, that was the time for that I needed for me, which, then didn't help me sleep and didn't help me. I woke up feeling kind of not, let's just say subpar.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it.
Yeah. But that's really what I used that as my coping mechanism. That was my only thing that I knew. And it just kind of escalated from there. So then now I'm drinking at home more heavily by myself to unwind. And then I was still drinking socially whenever whenever those opportunities arose, which were often probably. We always find time there's always something going on to drink at. But then, 2016, then we had to implement those changes. 2000, and the whole time, like 2016, I was named, one of the two people who won the Accountant of the Year award for our company, and for the work I did in 2015. So high functioning,
right.
And 2017 was a little bit normal. 2018 then was when we 2017, 2018, towards the end of there, was our company was looking to be acquired. So then it was a whole nother big project that we had to work on. And again, I was doing that along with my regular job. And, it became, a lot of things started, a lot of red flags started raising. And I know one good thing about my company was that they started making us do those biometric screenings, which is just getting blood work done. You had to get that done or else you got to charge or something like that.
Your insurance is more expensive or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So started doing that. And then it was like, so I had to get blood work done every year now, which now I recommend everybody do. But, once I got that done, like in 2018, my doctor was like, oh, your liver enzymes are elevated, and they weren't anything crazy. They were like around, my ALT was like close to or around 100, which I've heard hundreds. I've heard much higher numbers than that, but it was enough for my doctor to be like, oh, let's get an ultrasound of your liver and see what's going on. Because apparently he might not have believed me when I said I drink like 5 to 10 beers a week.
Just a couple, like nothing much.
So
if there's somebody out there listening right now who has never lied on a doctor's note about how much you drink, I don't know if you're in the right place. I mean, you're welcome here. Yeah. Everyone's welcome to listen, but I think everyone relates to, just a couple, 5 or 6 a week.
Yeah. Day. On a good day. But yeah, so I got the ultrasound and, fatty liver where I always say like, I'm like, well, duh, like I could have told you that without the ultrasound. Like I could, whenever I was waking up and, my whole side is kind of swollen and tender, like I kind of knew something was up there. But then it was in August of that year and I just kept drinking and I was like, what am I going to do here? And I remember like September 30th, I was listening to a podcast and they were doing like Sober October. And so I was like, okay. I'm like, let's do this. I mean, this is a good thing. I'll do this as a way to help myself. And I made it 5 days, I think, or maybe on the fifth day is when I drank it, whatever that Friday was, in 2018, is when I drank. And then I was like, oh, guess this month's over. So I'll just keep drinking. Versus I was definitely in that fixed mindset that I advise against, where, just let's not, the month isn't over. Like, you slip up once, you can keep going. But back then it was all or nothing for me.
Yeah. Or so then, we call it the buckets.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And so then, kept going. And then January, working a ton year end and all that. And it was very much, got to the point where I was just like, I was listening to books. I was like reading stuff on AA. Like, is this, I never got behind the steps for AA. Like that's what held me back. Like, plus I didn't know anybody in AA. Well, I don't know if I knew anybody in AA, obviously, right? It's anonymous.
Right.
So, so I didn't see anybody. I didn't know where to go. And I knew I could have went online and Googled it and saw where to go. But I just didn't like do that step, because I was more focused on the steps. And I was like, those don't really jive with me. And I listened to that, Russell Brand's book, Recovery, where he rebrands the steps. And
back there.
oh yeah. But yeah, the one thing that pushed me from that book was he changed one of the steps. I can't remember which one, to basically say, are you on your own going to unfuck yourself? And I remember driving in the car, listening to the book, to going to work. And I paused the audiobook at that point. And I was like, fuck, that's it. I'm like, no, I'm not. I've never been able to do stuff on my own. Like, I always need that accountability. I always need something else. Which sounds weird, but I always need, yeah. I mean, so that was, I think one of two things, that really pushed me. The other one was, a song lyric from Blue October, which, I have tattooed on my shoulder now, which says, I part of the song was like, I should have been a better man, but a should have, could have, would have isn't what a better man would do. And I remember driving in the car again. Apparently I had all my epiphanies in the car listening to stuff, with my daughter sitting there, and that lyric came on, and that kind of hit me. The shoulda, coulda, woulda isn't what a better man would do. And so those two things like really kind of stuck in my brain. And then, January 22nd, 2019, got drunk. Second day in a row. It was a Tuesday. Told myself I wasn't going to drink, finish this bottle of whiskey that night. I was just going to have a bottle of wine, but then I had the bottle of wine and then finished the bottle of whiskey. And I just kind of broke down on the couch and was like, I can't do this anymore. And I had my computer out and I typed in therapy online, and I'm like, oh yeah, BetterHelp. I did see that. And I signed up that night for that. And it's kind of where it all started. Well, that's where this journey, I guess, started. But still with my therapist today. I'll be talking to her again on Friday. So it's definitely been that's where it started for me. And I just needed to talk to somebody to share.
There's so many pieces of that. I'm over here writing notes on my sticky pad, because I don't have a brain and everything leaves my brain immediately. But yeah, exactly. If you can't see, if you're listening to the podcast version of this, both Kevin and I held up our notepads because I don't know if it's parent brain or COVID brain or just midlife brain or whatever it is. But my folks call it CRS, can't remember shit. That's where I'm at these days. But and I want to get into the therapy part in a minute, because I have some questions about what that looked like for you and how really this idea of talking to people and connecting with people has impacted your journey through this. But one of the things that you said in all of that was that drinking was kind of your time for yourself after the binge drinking in college and after like the social drinking. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I kind of have this perception of like the accounting world as like kind of a boys club where it's like just party, 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 work, work, work. Party. I don't know. I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, I'd have to talk to, I mean, I wouldn't say it's just a boys club.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if it's maybe more whenever because I started in 20, or I can't even say 2001.
2001.
2001. Yeah, that doesn't even, but no, I mean, it was definitely, I think there's definitely a good mix of men and women there. And
Okay.
I don't feel like it definitely was like probably 10 years before that for sure, or probably a couple years before that. And I would have to have some of my friends correct me if they think I'm wrong there. But
we'll
no,
give
it's definitely
we'll give the
definitely
women their dues and and just call it a party culture. But one of the things that you said that was really interesting to me was this idea of it being your time for yourself. And I think a lot of people are going to really resonate with that. I think that is how it feels for many of us. And you know, it's really interesting. I see so many people who are like you, who get accountant of the year, or who are in high performing jobs, or who have a family, or, you know, whatever it may look like, where it looks nice and fine on the outside, but they're secretly drinking a bottle of wine on the couch alone at night, every night. And that's who I was too. And I think it's really interesting when we think about when we have these really high stress jobs, when we have young kids, or when we've got people that we're caring for, or we've got a lot of different obligations on our plate, at the end of the day, we unwind to something. And we are so used to using alcohol as one of the ways to unwind. And it feels like a reward, and it feels celebratory, and it feels relaxing, and it feels like we deserve this. And the reality is that what it does to the time for ourselves is really wrecks it. It wrecks our sleep, and it wrecks our mental health, and it doesn't rest us. It only temporarily puts a Band-Aid on it. But I'm just, and I don't know the answer to this, but I'm just curious about like how we got there and how we got to this place of like alcohol being associated with self-care, with time for ourselves, with relaxation at the end of the day. And I don't know, I just like keep, especially when you're talking about accounting, I like have, it's like Mad Men in my brain still. So I like keep thinking of like John Hamm cracking open a whiskey at the end of the day. But, you know, and like I said, I don't know the answer to this, but it's just something that's interesting. And I think a lot of people are going to really resonate with what you said about it. It turned into something that was your way to unwind, this time for yourself. But I wanted to dig into what therapy did for you in your early sober days, and really how you perceive or what your experience is in this space as a man who just needs to talk to somebody. And you posted a reel the other day that really spoke to me. And it was a hodgepodge of people saying like, who's the person you reach out to when you're at your lowest and you need somebody? And then it was multiple men in a row saying nobody.
Yeah.
So what has that looked like for you? What has your experience in that been? And tell us more about why you share about that.
Yeah. Yeah. My wife sent me that TikTok, so I reshared it, and it was, you know, like you said, who do you reach out to? And it was a bunch of people saying like, nobody, I'm a man, like nobody cares, or, you know, that type of thing. And that's not necessarily true, but I feel that is our perception regardless, because that's what we see, right?
Yeah.
In it's been passed down generationally, I think. And it definitely is, you know, the strong silent type and that type of thing, you know, key emphasis on silent, I think. And it's tough to get out of that mentality. And I'm still not out of that mentality. I mean, it's still there. I do better with it. But yeah, like the whole time, whenever I knew, let's say the end of 2018, early 2019, for me, it kind of got dark in my head because I knew I had to change something. I knew I couldn't keep going like this. I knew I was going to die if I kept drinking the way I was. And I didn't know who I could say that to. I didn't know, because I was the one that had my shit together. And, you know, obviously my wife would disagree with that, and I could have talked to her at any point in time. And I know I could have, but it's that, but that, you know, I have this perception that, I don't know, I'd feel lesser than, or, you know, I'm supposed to be the one that's supposed to take care of everybody. And that's just, you know, mine. And I'm assuming a high majority of, of guys' mentality.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to open up and say that. I've never been taught that. So it is a tough, hurdle. It's a wall to jump over. It's not even a hurdle. And so for me, I just, like, I've never been diagnosed with depression or anything like that, but I know I was depressed at the end of that year severely. And I would, you know, I'd be, like I had said, you know, my alone time drinking, I'd be downstairs in the basement on my couch, with, you know, whatever. And, you know, a lot of nights end up just kind of being like, what the fuck am I doing? And breaking down in tears or whatever, only to pass out and wake up at 5 a.m. whenever, with all the lights on and the pipe right there, because my wife's taking a shower, getting ready for work. And I'm like, fuck. And crawl back upstairs and, you know, get another hour or two of sleep and go to work and repeat. And just couldn't break out of that cycle. So I knew if I was going to change, if I wasn't going to just drink myself to death, I knew I had to talk to somebody about it. So that's when I was like, okay, I need to do something about alcohol. I wasn't going to go to AA, and I wasn't going to go to a therapist's office. Like, if like, I'm lazy. I'm not afraid to admit I'm fairly lazy. So if I have to go somewhere on a repeated basis, whether it's for my life or not, I need to make it as easy as possible for me. So
we'll call them barriers to entry.
Exactly. So there are a lot of barriers to entry there. And so I took those away by, you know, logging into BetterHelp and signing up that night. And then it took, so that was a Tuesday night. I didn't tell my wife until Friday night, and I poured myself a glass of whiskey. You know, we went upstairs. She was at the desk. I was at the chair, and we were talking, and for 20 minutes we talked, and I have no idea what she said, because the whole time I'm like, how do I say this to her? Yeah. How do I say this to her? All the while, like, drinking so that I can, you know, get that liquid courage, in order to say, I'm like, what would you say if I told you I needed to see a therapist for my drinking? And she's like, you know, I think, you know, anybody who wants to, you know, work on their mental health or better themselves that way, I think they should. So yeah, no. And so obviously I knew she wasn't going to say, like, no, what are you, a week? You know, it's not like I knew she wasn't going to say that. But in my head, it's like, I'm admitting that was tough, because it was admitting that I had a problem. It was admitting that I needed help. I couldn't do it anymore. So, I mean, that was the big deal with that.
I can feel that in my chest, like you talking about sitting there, not listening to anything she said, because you're thinking about what you're saying. I can feel the own anxiety in my body, or my own anxiety in my own body. And I hear a big, heavy sigh from you from that too. Yeah.
No, I feel it in my head right now, kind of like, you know, that tingling, and yeah, definitely. So I drank that night, and then I didn't drink again for like 60 days. Because, you know, then I started talking to, my therapist, and working with her, and then I could be more open with my wife. And I mean, it wasn't easy. Like,
Hmm.
I've thrown this out too. So BetterHelp, you could, it's kind of like the Reframe coaching where you can
Mm-hmm.
text people and you can also have like live sessions. So
Yeah.
I would always text my therapist, and say like, whatever, if I had that urge to drink, I would pull out my phone, and that was my journaling, I guess. That's
Yeah.
kind of where that became big for me, to sit there and go through like what I'm feeling in that moment, what I'm doing. And then sometimes I'd be like, all right, copy, paste, text it to my
Mm-hmm.
wife. And she's like literally sitting on the couch, like 5 feet away from me. I'm like, read that text once. Because that was my kind of way to start opening up. And for me, it was easier to type it out and think through it and kind of get those thoughts on paper, not on paper, but in my phone and out of my head. Because it's hard for me to verbalize that sometimes.
And how did it feel for you when you started looping Ange in and sharing more of what the internal process was like?
I mean, it was freeing a little bit to have her know like how I was feeling, and she's been nothing but supportive and all that, which has been a blessing, I guess. I mean, I've had it a little bit easy from that perspective versus other people because she doesn't really drink at all, and so. But then also too, she doesn't necessarily understand fully like what it is. Like she knows what it's like to be pressured to drink because she doesn't really drink. So she knows when people are like, oh, come on, just have one. But not from the standpoint of you really want one.
And the compulsive need to drink more.
Yeah.
I ask that because one of the things that I share with my clients and the people I work with is that though it is one of the most difficult things you can possibly do, whenever you are able to have radical honesty within a relationship, an intimate relationship, with the caveat that it needs to be, it has to be a safe relationship. So if it's an unsafe relationship, it won't be met correctly. But when you can have honesty with somebody, even one person, it really changes it's freeing. As you said, it is both freeing because first off, you're no longer the one who is solely carrying that, but it's also, I think one of the things that we're so afraid of is that we're going to be met with distaste or judgment or somebody being mad or upset at us. And more often than not, especially when it's a safe container, if it's a safe relationship, we are met with kindness and empathy and support and maybe concern and maybe some sort of like sometimes confused, sometimes misguided support, but generally met with kindness. And it really changes the experience from being solely internal to starting to externalize it and starting to move through it in a positive way. So you connected with your therapist and you started sharing these experiences. How did that change your path to now being several years alcohol-free?
She gave me tools. Like for the first time, I was like, and I don't even know if we called it a toolkit at that point. But I might've learned that on the gram later on.
Thanks, Instagram.
Yeah. But, she just that, which I tell her now, like, I'm like, you didn't get paid enough for me. Cause you had to read my messages that I sent and, but just being able to type out what I was thinking and what I was going through and what I was struggling with at that moment, like, and sending that to somebody, knowing that she's not going to read it now. It's not her hours. She's going to check it. She'll see it tomorrow, maybe. Knowing that just kind of had that weight lifted off of me. But also, just accountability is huge for me, as it is for many people. But like that is like if I'm held accountable to somebody, if I feel held accountable to somebody, like I want to stick with that.
Mm.
And, just having that support is what helps me.
Well, it's like you said earlier, trying to do it alone is so hard when you're the only person in this internal experience. And for me, it was, my rock bottom was simply just a constant disappointment of myself. It wasn't anything big or external, but it was just, I couldn't keep promises to myself. I just constantly disappointed myself. I couldn't stop on my own, no matter what. And I really, both from a personal and a clinical perspective now, really believe that we can't do this by ourselves. We really truly can't. And part of that is formed in the idea that willpower is bullshit. Like there's no such, if there is any such thing as willpower, it is like a tiny fraction of the actual equation. There's so many other components of this. There's neurochemistry, there's physiology, there's your environment, there's your support network. There's so many other pieces of this that are involved in this, that willpower alone is not enough to get sober. And I think we're socialized to believe that it is. And we're socialized in our societal understanding of alcohol use disorder or alcoholism or whatever you want to call it, really relies heavily on willpower and like the morality of alcohol. And I think that, if anybody takes anything away from your content, I really see this idea of like, we can't do it alone, and that we don't have to. And I think that that's really, really powerful for some people to see.
Yeah. And I've said this before, and it's, when I hear that, it's like, it's not a moral failing to be addicted to an addictive substance that's pushed to us from childhood through, our lives. And every single thing we go to has this there, whether it's a a 1-year-old's birthday to a funeral, a wedding, every celebration in between. And, it's ridiculous that people still think that you should just be able to control this. You should just be able to, you should be strong enough, to do that. I just say I do things and I do them. Oh, okay. Good for you.
Good for you. Must be nice.
Willpower, whatever that is needed. Like sometimes you do just have to kind of get through it.
Yeah.
We can say, oh, go to your toolkit and all that, but that's in there. Sometimes I've white knuckled it through some nights, but white knuckling it through those nights might be telling Ange that I'm struggling, or I used to tell her, I'm like, can I get you anything? And I'd be like, okay, I'm just going to get myself a bourbon. Or she would ask me, she's like, oh, can I get you anything? And I'm like, yeah, but a whiskey. She's like, haha, no. And so she did that a couple times, like,
no.
But so then I had to like tell her, I'm like, just so you know, whenever I jokingly, air quotes, jokingly say that I want a whiskey, I really, in those moments, like I really want to drink. That's just my sarcasm and deflection kicking in. So then she's like, oh, okay, well, that's good to know.
Yeah. Secret code.
Yeah, exactly. Which I used in Vegas this year, over 2 years alcohol free. And we go to Vegas in June, and we get there, and the first day of any vacation is always my huge drinking day, because, the stress of getting to vacation and getting work done beforehand in order to go and getting there and all that. And then, so we got there, we put our bags in the hotel. I had to drive in Vegas, which on a Saturday night to get to the hotel, which it wasn't that bad, but it was stressful enough at that point. And we get there, and we're all standing in the middle of the casino and talking, and where do you want to eat? What do you want to do? And I just see alcohol around, that the smells, the sounds. And I look at Ange, I'm like, if we don't decide where we're going to eat right now, I'm going over to that bar and I'm getting a whiskey. And she's like, all right, let's go get pizza.
Let's go get cupcakes or something.
And I had pizza and a Diet Coke, and I felt 1000% better.
Yep.
But it was just that anxiety building up inside of me, and in that atmosphere.
And a
It was fun.
need for an immediate release, and
Yeah.
then our brain's association with vacation and the sound
Yeah.
of slot machines and all of
Yep.
these things that we think, I think it's really
Cigarettes and
interesting.
stale
Yeah.
beer.
Yeah. Or like you'll go to an environment and you're like, oh my God, I have not experienced this cacophony of smells and sounds and sights in 5 years. And I'm like immediately back in my drinking days.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
every time you experience that, you've checked one off your list, and you have fewer to experience moving forward, but it's really real. And I think, I like that you say like several years into being alcohol free, you still have this experience. And I think that's the reality of it. I think that's the reality of this, that it is something that we have been conditioned for most of our life to think of. And then we had a lot of years practicing it. And now we're trying to do a new thing, but our brain is still going to snap to those
Yeah.
things every now and then.
And I was, and she knew I wasn't, and I knew I wasn't going to go over there and walk over to the bar. But in my head, that's where my mind immediately went.
Yep. First thought.
Yeah. People just walking around with drinks, all that. Yeah.
So you recently, you mentioned earlier about leaving your corporate accounting job and moving into the recovery field. Can you tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to make that massive shift kind of at this point in your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of snowballed, I guess, over the time. Cause one thing, it was basically one thing led to another. I started my Instagram account for me. Just nobody followed me. I just shared pictures for myself. It was like my little photo journal in the summer of 2019. And it was a couple months later, I think in October, I looked over at Ange after I posted something. I'm like, did you know I have like a separate Instagram account? She's like, no. So she was my first follower. Mm-hmm. And then I started opening up and I started following other people, and then I would like share a little bit, but I was private, and then somebody would say, "Oh, thanks for sharing that." And so then I would go, and so then I made it public, and I started sharing more just about things. Like I would type things to my therapist, and I'd be like, "Oh, you know what? Copy paste," and it became kind of my journal, in a sense. Or I type things in my journal, and I would be like, "Oh, you know what? I should probably post that." And so then I would edit it and post it. But then as I did that, like it felt so much better for me, again, the accountability to share that with nobody and everybody all at once. I was still, I probably had a picture or something. You could probably, my name wasn't on there, but you could see my, I posted a picture or whatever, but nobody really followed me that I knew. And so it was still like this safe space where I could share without, others knowing. And I just noticed that it helped. I always debated, like, should I post this or shouldn't I? And then when I would post it, and one person would go and say like, "Oh, thank you so much for sharing this today. Like this helped me so much," or whatever. I was like, "That's it." I'm like, "That's all I care about." I'm glad I posted it. And because I know I read things, I know I looked at people's accounts, and I was like, "Oh, that's why I'm not gonna drink right now, because that helped me." And then so I guess in that 2020 there, as we're getting into that, I followed 1,000 Hours Dry, and I was, they shared one of my pictures in January. I was like, "Oh my God, 1,000 Hours Dry shared my picture."
I'm famous.
Yeah, and they did it again in March, but
for those who are listening, both Kevin and I have been in and around the 1,000 Hours Dry family for a long time. So it's a great account to follow if you are not already following.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, so then I saw in March they posted like, "Hey, we're looking for hosts," and that's when it was just like 1 or 2 pages. I think it was One HD, and then 1,000 Hours Dry Denver.
Yeah,
at the time. With Amber, and then. So it was, so I was, I reached out and I talked to Adam, Boozless and Boots, I think his name handle is now. And I'm like, "Hey," cause I've talked to him before, and I'm like, "Hey, what does that entail?" And immediately he's like, "Oh yeah, Kayla's going to call you." Who's the founder. And so we talked, and I started that April. And so that was kind of my start into sharing more, opening up, sharing with a wider audience. And, that kind of became, because then right? Wasn't that pandemic time too?
Yeah, probably around then.
Yeah. March of 2020. So yeah, it was April 2020 is when so I'm working from home. I have my day that I'm hosting, but that became, really something I was like passionate about, like being able to share and go and like, do, respond to comments and direct messages and all that. It was just another thing that I did. And it was almost like from that point on, like I have this kind of personality, I think, where it's like, I need to just keep, like, if somebody keeps giving me something to do, I'm not going to say no, which is a problem, which is why maybe I drank a little too much.
I know. I'm trying to teach Kevin how to say no, but it's work in progress.
It's hard. It hasn't happened yet, which is why I'm here today.
Yeah. I'm glad he didn't say no to me, but otherwise,
because literally, like, that's it. Like I was, oh yeah, I'll do that. I'll do an Instagram live. And then the next thing I know, Kayla's emailing, all these, celebrities for, or just, people in the sober space, asking like, hey, do you want to be on like coffee chats with Kevin? I'm like, wait, it has a name now. Like, what's going on here? And then, so then I felt like, yeah, so then I did that every week, and that became something that stressed me out. 1000%. Like that was so, and again, it's so far out of my comfort zone that I just kept pushing myself to do it. And like, if somebody said like, oh, why don't you do this? Or, I would like, all right, I'll figure it out as I go. Let's just do it. But then I got more comfortable with it. Like I prepped for hours for like those first couple of lives. And then the last, by the time I was doing them at the end, I would just show up and, I knew the person who I was going to talk to. I had my list of questions, and it was super easy, right? But it's just repetition. It's just practicing that. So that was how I kind of, as that went on later in 2020, I signed up for, I was debating what to do, but I signed up for a coaching certification program. After talking with my therapist and going back and forth, and I looked at the psychology route, and I apologize if you hear this, but my 4-pound chihuahua is like snoring like crazy.
I can't hear it. It's okay.
But she, I even looked, and like from 20 years ago, like half of my credits would count. So I would only need to take like 2 years of undergrad to get my psychology degree. But then I was like, I have to get masters, and I have to do this and that. And I'm like, all right, we talked about the coaching route, and I was kind of skeptical at first about that. And I'm like, I kind of hear coaching, and I'm like, is that really a thing? Like, is that really but my program is great. And I love that. And
as somebody who has an undergrad in psych, and then did have to go get a master's degree, like probably made a wise choice.
Yeah.
It's very time consuming.
Yeah. And like my therapist says too, like you're then kind of limited because you can only practice in certain areas, right, and like in locations and things like that. Whereas coaching is much more open from that perspective. But yeah, so, like I say, it was just like one thing after another, like, okay, let's do this. Okay, why not? Let's do this. And
I hear the snowball that you talked about of like, it just kept building on itself, and you just kept saying yes. And truly what I hear though is like a trusting of God. I almost said trust the process, but a trusting of your gut and listening to the inner little whispers that say, okay, this way, even if you don't know what the end goal is, it's like, okay, go this way. This feels good. Yeah. This feels right. This feels good. And I think that that's something that no matter what you're doing, whoever's listening to this, like, even if you don't plan on being a recovery coach or working in the recovery space, like just this idea of just listening to the thing that says, go this way and not this way. And knowing that I had a great conversation with Jyoti Chand in our last podcast, and we were talking about intuition. And I think that first off, I believe that we as people have very intelligent intuitions, but also I think when we remove alcohol, we're able to listen to it better, and we have more clarity around it. And we have the ability to really say, okay, trust myself for the first time, maybe in a long time. Cause I know I sure did not trust myself for a long time, but I hear this idea of like, okay, just listening to this, whatever voice, spirit, source, inner wisdom, whatever you want to call it, the brain say, let's go this way and not this way. And eventually leading to something that feels really, really good and aligned. Yeah. So I want to ask one last question before we wrap this up, but I always ask everybody at the end of the podcast, if your story were to be published, the story of you in alcohol or you in sobriety or you in recovery or whatever you want to call it, what would the book be titled and what kind of book would it be? Put you on the spot.
Yeah. What type of book? Like I've actually thought about a book.
Yeah. Past, are you writing a book? Are you writing a book?
No, I'm not. But I think everybody,
I will read your book, Kevin.
So I'm trying to think of like, I did have some titles and I can't, just messing around, but I feel like I don't feel like my story is like special or I was going to say or extraordinary, but I think that's what makes it important to know for people to hear is that it's ordinary. Like this is just, it affects everybody. It's not, I wasn't living under a bridge. I wasn't doing any of that. But so one of my titles, I think, and I posted this like a long time ago. But it was basically don't man up, open up.
Ooh, I like that. Open up, don't man up. Something along those lines. I like that.
Because I think I posted a picture where it just said, man up, and I crossed out the man and I just said open. And basically, like ways to change our habits, change how we handle these situations, change how we can talk with people, and really just change how we do things, how we've been taught to do things, because not to say that they're wrong, but we need better tools.
Yeah.
And I say I think everybody, but especially men, I think need to realize that they don't have to not say anything or just suck it up or drink through their problems and things like that. There are better ways to do it. I was a stress ball and I drank because of stress, but then I found out that by removing alcohol, I realized that I was causing my stress. Like I needed new ways to deal with it, but that was definitely not doing me any favors.
Yeah.
So
amazing. I like it. I'm gonna figure out how to like strike through on the text. Man, strike through, open up, because I think that's an excellent title. And I'm so glad you hit on the point that it is extraordinary through being ordinary. And I think that truly is the ethos of what we're doing here, that everybody's story matters, and my story matters, and your story matters, and every single person listening, your story matters too. And what seemed ordinary to us is a guidebook for somebody else. And what seems normal to us is something that will have substantial impact to somebody else.
Yeah. And I've seen it time and time again with myself and with others, like who I've been friends with, who I am coaching, like the whole thing of you just making this one change gives people permission to think about it, because we think that nobody else is, everybody's fine with the way they drink until you stop drinking. And then you give them permission to be like, oh, I didn't realize we could do that.
Yep.
And
I think it's Oscar Wilde. I'm probably wildly misquoting this, but be an opener of doors. It probably it's not Oscar Wilde. We'll put that in the show notes, but be an opener of doors is really a motto that I have taken on myself. Well, Kevin, this has been amazing. I know I could talk to you for hours because we have done it before. I know our audience is going to want to connect with you. Where can they find you? What do you have going on right now? What sort of projects do you have?
Currently, I am. So like we talked about, I'm no longer an accountant. So I'm full time. I'm head of coaching over at Reframe. So I'm coaching over there and trying to build that side of the Reframe app platform, and make it more accessible to people and easier to get to. So that's my day and night job. But it's very nice to just focus on one thing for once.
Yeah.
You can also find me over at the Sober Ginger on Instagram. Although I do need to get better about getting over there and answering my DMs and all that and posting lately, because I have been very silent as of late because I've just been focused on this new job. But I swear I'll be getting back into that soon.
Those DMs, they kill me too. Don't worry about it. I think it gets us all.
it's a constant, like, sorry for the delay.
Yeah.
But no, so yeah, you can find me over there. And yeah, that's the main
Amazing.
spots.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and your story. I really, truly believe that somebody out there listening is going to hear your otherwise ordinary story and say, oh my God, that is me. And if he can do it, then I can do it. And that is really what we're doing here. We are opening doors. We are giving permission for a different way of doing things and new tools and new paths forward. So I really appreciate your time and the story you have shared with us. Thank you for your time today, Kevin, and we will talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on, and appreciate it. Appreciate what you're doing. And yeah, talk soon.
All right, bye.